Raikkonen, though, is at the bottom of the hill. It's the big climb up the hill now that will make him the world champion of 2007. He came here third out of three. He's going away in the lead. He is going to be world champion. Kimi Raikkonen wins the Brazilian Grand Prix. His first victory here, the 15th of his career, and by no doubt the most important. Massive finishes in second place. Alonso is going to come in third, and the dream is over for Lewis Hamilton. Kimi Raikkonen is world champion.
Okay, it's all over. It's all over. Hamilton 7th. Hamilton 7th. By my calculations, we win the championship by 1 point.
Not too long ago, I covered up Kimi Raikkonen's 2007 F1 championship season. What a season that was during his first year with Ferrari, and he most certainly did not disappoint in the slightest that season. A few years prior to 2007, Kimi was close to winning the championship but came up short. Twice. Once in 2003, another 2005. For this episode, I'll be discussing his 2005 campaign. Before I continue and get even further into it, if you like what you're seeing thus far, feel free to subscribe to the channel so you'll be up to speed, or take a trip down memory lane with F1 and other motorsport videos like this on this YouTube channel. That being said, onwards with the presentation. The first few seasons with McLaren for Kimi Raikkonen came and went with mixed results. 2002 was very abysmal, following 11 DNFs out of 17 races on the calendar. That's more than 60% races run, and Kimi failed to finish, again, 11 of them, which I did a video on a few years ago. But a bounce back in 2003 due to consistency, and had a shot at the championship challenging Michael Schumacher and Juan Pablo Montoya, but in the end, lost out by 2 points. Then 2004 came and went, which was an okay season that could have been better. But things did get better the following season in 2005, as far as pace and consistency goes. In other words, Raikkonen hit his prime, showcasing championship caliber drives. But things got off to a slow start to kick off 2005. 8th in the season opener on the streets of Albert Park, followed that up by a 9th place result in round 2 in Sepang. But then in Bahrain, got a podium finish of 3rd. And the San Marino Grand Prix in Imola was the next stop on the calendar, where Kimi Raikkonen put his McLaren MP4 20 on the pole position grid slot. At first, things looked smooth sailing, but not even 10 laps in, problems with the drive shaft forced Raikkonen into retirement. You would think with the way things are this early in the going, he was nowhere near the level of Fernando Alonso to challenge for in the championship race. Especially since at the conclusion of the San Marino Grand Prix, Raikkonen was off the lead in the championship by a margin of 29 points behind the Spaniard of Alonso. And with Alonso securing the win in Imola, after that amazing battle with Schumacher, increasing his lead in the championship table ahead of the rest, Raikkonen had to quickly turn it around and put the pedal to the floor if he was to have any chance of catching up. But then came the Spanish Grand Prix and the Monaco Grand Prix, and on both occasions saw Raikkonen secure pole. Not only that, but led from lights to flag in both events. After Monaco was the Grand Prix of Europe at the Nürburgring, and this is one of the few memorable races when discussing Raikkonen's 2005 campaign and Raikkonen's career as a whole. But in this case, it's infamously remembered for the wrong and painful reasons. having dominated the European Grand Prix and looked to have it all under control and in the bag, going for 3 wins in a row, it was smooth sailing at first. Until the closing stages when Raikkonen's right front tire was wearing out. The more the car vibrates due to the degradation of the worn out tire, the more stress it puts on the suspension. And due to this, on the last lap, heading into the first corner, the suspension broke, sending the McLaren into a spin and into the tire barrier, giving the win away to Fernando Alonso. In Montreal, it was the other way around. Alonso this time had a broken suspension after pushing it a little too hard and bounced off the wall from the lead. Kimi Raikkonen picked up the scraps and went on to win, sealing maximum points and furthermore clocked in the fastest lap of the race. Raikkonen also set another fast lap time at Manicourt for the French Grand Prix, but as far as a race win is concerned, he didn't have the answer to that. In other words, he couldn't catch Fernando Alonso's Renault coming to the checkers, but Raikkonen did what he needed to do to still earn some points, that of 8 with a second place finish. After the French Grand Prix, Raikkonen sat behind Alonso by a margin of 24 points, meaning a championship was still possible at this stage. In Silverstone for the next race, Raikkonen originally qualified on the front row of the grid, but due to an engine change, suffered a grid penalty and had to start from 12th. And yet, he worked his way through the field, once again setting the fastest lap en route to the podium, finishing 3rd, albeit behind his championship rival. That being said, the gap in the standings increased by 2 points, going from 24 to 26 behind Alonso. Unfortunately, more bad luck struck again for the Iceman at the German Grand Prix at Hockenheim. Sure, he got the pole position and was up there leading a vast majority of the Grand Prix and set the fastest lap for good measure, but hydraulics plagued his chances of winning, and just like at the Nürburgring, and Imola for that matter, gave the win away to Fernando Alonso. In Hungary, Raikkonen tasted champagne of redemption, pulling away from the Schumachers and claiming the top step of the podium for what was his 4th win of 2005, leading the most laps and setting the fastest lap of the race for good measure in the process. Coming into Istanbul Park for the very first time, it was an easy walk in the park, securing the pole position and on race day, ran away from the pack leading all 58 laps of the Turkish Grand Prix to claim the dub. And in Monza, he could have started from pole, but due to another grid penalty for an engine change like in Silverstone, was demoted to 11th. Come race day, 4th place was all he could do when it was all said and done, when it could have been very different had he started from the front row. Now trailing behind by 27 points with only 4 more races left to go. It was now or never. Next up on the calendar was Spa for the Belgian Grand Prix, a place where Kimi Raikkonen won last time out in 2004. This time around in 2005, it was basically the same result, leading in the final stages and went on to win in Spa for the 2nd year in a row. And what would be the last time Spa was in its old configuration before getting an overhaul. In Brazil, finished 2nd to his McLaren teammate Juan Pablo Montoya for what was Montoya's 7th and final win of his F1 career. But at this point late in the season, at Raikkonen's expense, it was all over. Fernando Alonso was to become the world champion if he got on the podium. And he did, making him at the time the youngest in history to accomplish such a feat. In Raikkonen's case, even though the championship was already locked up for Alonso, the main objective now was to finish off 2005 on a high note. Speaking of, the following round in Japan, Raikkonen started from the back of the bus on 17th on the grid. But despite that, he kept his cool and stayed out of trouble, passing car after car, while setting the fastest lap of the race in the process. And sure enough, found himself behind the Renault of Giancarlo Fisichella for the lead in the final laps. And what happens next is etched into the minds of many Formula One fans.
Has he got enough traction to keep the McLaren behind him? He's really left himself to be a sitting target now. He'll have to go defensive down the inside. He'll have to go tighter than that. Oh, and they nearly touch. Can Raikkonen sweep in? Yes! Brilliant!
What a brilliant move! Side by side down the straight. Grand Prix racing at its absolute finest. Kimi Raikkonen sweeps through to take the lead of the Japanese Grand Prix. Let's enjoy this again.
And he moves to the right to force him to the left-hand side, but there's so much more grip there, and then it's Fisichella facing the tighter line into the corner. But again, he got it all wrong at the top chicane by just compromising his exit. And then, as I said, he was always going to be a sitting target down the pit straight. Brilliant stuff from Raikkonen.
Absolutely sensational. Kimi Raikkonen then heading for his 10th Grand Prix victory. And here he comes then. Takuma Sato there has caused a few problems this afternoon, but not as Raikkonen sweeps through to lap him. And one of the most dramatic Grand Prix in living memory comes to a close with Kimi Raikkonen, the winner! Absolutely sensational performance. In second place will be Giancarlo Fisichella. Raikkonen loves that.
Finally, there's the season finale in Shanghai, China. Again, setting the fastest lap and finishing 4 seconds behind Fernando Alonso in second place to wrap it all up. Second place in the final race of the 2005 season, second place in the championship, second place for McLaren in the Constructors' Championship. In the drivers' table, 21 points was the difference between second place Raikkonen and champion Fernando Alonso. Raikkonen scored 112 points compared to Alonso's score of 133. As far as the constructors are concerned, 9 points was the gap between Renault's 191 points ahead of McLaren, as McLaren scored 182 points. What could have been another championship season for McLaren, but came up just short in both Constructors and Drivers' Championships. In Raikkonen's case, granted, had reliability woes, but had the package to win the title, as the McLaren MP4 20 was insanely fast. And indeed, the McLaren MP4 20 was the package to win the championship, but as we know, the package failed to deliver as far as the championship is concerned, obviously. Kimi Raikkonen's stats from the 2005 season look like this: 7 wins, 12 podiums, 8 front row starts, with 5 of them from pole, clocking in the most fastest laps of 10, with 4 DNFs, but leading for 375 laps, with an average start of 5.9, as well as an average finish rate of 4.9. Consistent, but not consistent enough to claim the crown. At least finishing ahead of Ferrari and Michael Schumacher was a plus, considering how much they dominated F1 in the late 90s and early 2000s, particularly the early 2000s. But regarding Kimi Raikkonen and McLaren, 2005 was one of the best seasons for the Iceman and McLaren as a whole. Sure, they didn't win the title at the end of the day, but they were up there. Had things played a bit differently in races such as the European Grand Prix especially, or the German Grand Prix, and with little to no reliability troubles, it could have been a whole different scenario. And it makes many wonder, what if he made it to the finish and just held off Alonso at the Nürburgring for the win? What if there were no mechanical problems in Imola and Hockenheim? What if it was Alonso with the mechanical woes that Raikkonen encountered throughout the entire season? What if, in 2005, Kimi Raikkonen, the Iceman, captured his missing ring?